cell phones releases a chemical called dopamine. That's why when you get a text, it feels good, right? So, we've all had it where you're feeling a little bit down or feeling a bit lonely, and so you send out 10 texts to 10 friends, hi, 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 because it feels good when you get a response, right? Right? It's why we count the likes. It's why we go back 10 times to see if my Instagram is growing slower. Did I do something wrong? Do they not like me anymore? Right? The trauma for young kids to be unfriended, right? Because we know when you get a hit of dopamine, which feels good. It's why we like it. It's why we keep going back to it. Dopamine is the exact same chemical that makes us feel good when we smoke, when we drink, and when we gamble. In other words, it's highly, highly addictive. Right? We have age restrictions on smoking, gambling, and alcohol, and we have no age restrictions on social media and cell phones, which is the equivalent of opening up the liquor cabinet and saying to our teenagers, hey, by the way, this adolescence thing, if it gets you down. But that's basically what's happening. That's basically what's happening, right? That's basically what happened. You have an entire generation that has access to an addictive, numbing chemical called dopamine through social media and cell phones as they're going through the high stress of adolescence. Why is this important? Almost every alcoholic discovered alcohol when they were teenagers. When we're very, very young, the only approval we need is the approval of our parents. And as we go through adolescence, we make this transition where we now need the approval of our peers. Very frustrating for our parents, very important for us. It allows us to acculturate outside of our immediate families into the broader tribe. Right? It's a highly, highly stressful and anxious period of our lives, and we're supposed to learn to rely on our friends. Some people, quite by accident, discover alcohol and numbing effects of dopamine to help them cope with the stresses and anxieties of adolescence. Unfortunately, that becomes hardwired in their brains, and for the rest of their lives, when they suffer significant stress, they will not turn to a person, they will turn to the bottle. Social stress, financial stress, career stress, that's pretty much the primary reasons why an alcoholic drinks. Right? What's happening is because we're allowing unfettered access to these dopamine-producing devices and media, basically it's becoming hardwired, and what we're seeing is as they grow older, too many kids don't know how to form deep, meaningful relationships. Their words, not mine. They will admit that many of their friendships are superficial. They will admit that their friends, that they don't count on their friends, they don't rely on their friends, they have fun with their friends, but they also know that their friends will cancel on them if something better comes along. Deep, meaningful relationships are not there because they never practice the skill set, and worse, they don't have the coping mechanisms to deal with stress. So when significant stress starts to show up in their lives, they're not turning to a person, they're turning to a device, they're turning to social media, they're turning to these things which offer temporary relief. We know, the science is clear, we know that people who spend more time on Facebook suffer higher rates of depression than people who spend less time on Facebook. Right? These things balanced. Alcohol is not bad. Too much alcohol is bad. Gambling is fun. Too much gambling is dangerous. Right? There's nothing wrong with social media and cell phones. It's the imbalance. Right? If you're sitting at dinner with your friends and you're texting somebody who's not there, that's a problem. That's an addiction. If you're sitting in a meeting with people you're supposed to be listening to and speaking, and you put your phone on the table, face up or face down, I don't care, that sends a subconscious message to the room that you're just not that important to me right now, right? That's what happens. And the fact that you cannot put it away is because you are addicted, right? If you wake up and you check your phone before you say good morning to your girlfriend, boyfriend, or spouse, you have an addiction. And like all addiction, in time, it'll destroy relationships, it'll cost time, and it'll cost money, and it'll make your life worse.
Dopamine is a neurotransmitter, which is a hormone-like communication or message that travels through the nervous system, versus hormones are communications that travel through the blood. And this neurotransmitter has the effect of giving you pleasure. Okay, so it's a pleasure neurotransmitter. It does other things that are involved with reward and even motion. So if you have a problem with dopamine deficiencies, you might have resting tremors and Parkinson's, which is a different thing. But it's mainly pleasure. It's a feel-good hormone. It also gives you that vitality. So if you could imagine, not that you ever took cocaine, but the sensation of taking cocaine, what you would feel like, this heightened pleasure, ability to conquer everything, it's only because cocaine and other drugs stimulate dopamine. So the actual physical feeling that you have is coming from dopamine, not really the drug. The drug is only the trigger that creates more dopamine in the body. So my thought is, why can't we just make sure this is high naturally, right? So if you're deficient in dopamine, you lack motivation, you lack that drive. You become fatigued, you kind of lose your goals, addictions, very addictive personality, mood issues, anxiety, depression, resting tremor, things like that. So you can see that this is a very popular neurotransmitter that people are trying to increase by doing a lot of things, especially, drugs. The causes of a dopamine deficiency would be excessive caffeine can deplete it, but it's interesting because caffeine will initially make you feel good, but if you take too much over time, it kind of decreases the dopamine effect. Alcohol will decrease dopamine. Certain drugs, cocaine, all those type of drugs, and even a lot of the psych drugs, Prozac, Paxil, Wellbutrin, all of those do increase dopamine. So over time, it depletes dopamine. So it's a trick. You bring it up and it's bring it down. Same thing with like drugs. If you're addicted to drugs, you're going to deplete your dopamine reserves, and you're going to cause the necessity to take more and more drug over time. Insulin, sugar will deplete dopamine. Stress will deplete dopamine. Cortisol from the adrenals will deplete dopamine. Low stomach acids. If you don't have enough stomach acid, you can't digest protein in general. So you start developing a problem with making neurotransmitters in general. So you'll be deficient in a lot of different neurotransmitters. So the point is, how do you know if you're deficient in stomach acid? Well, number one, do you have heartburn? Do you have acid reflux? Do you get indigestion? That would mean that you're probably deficient in stomach acid. As you age, you need more stomach acid. So just by adding more apple cider vinegar or betaine hydrochloride, you can increase your neurotransmitter reserve. Okay, then we have adrenal stress. The adrenal gland, the inside of the adrenal gland, makes dopamine. So if your adrenals are burnt out,